So this is the box we're going to be doing today, and primarily we're interested in two things. The top inlay over here, which is wenge and yellow heart, and this wood is cherry. And then the second one is the actual one that we want to, is the topic of this particular video, is the inlays. These are very, very thin veneers. So this box has three different kinds. We have a very thick veneer, I'm sorry, not a veneer. We have a very thick inlay here done with anywhere from 1/16 to 1/8 inch wood, wenge and yellow heart. On this side here, we're just going to have a simple engraving. And on this side and this side, we will have the thin veneers. So let's go ahead and see how to set this up in the design and do the inlays. I get most of my veneers from Sawyers and Company. The local woodcraft store sells them, and they come in different packs. You can get like something like this, which is dyed wild colors, and you get orange and blue and gray and yellow. All of those are in one particular bag. Or, you can get stuff like this, which is just one single color. So I lucked out on this one, and this is dyed red. I use red a lot, and it just happened to be on sale. It's pretty pricey, $24 for, just a few square inches really of red, but it goes a long way, and you can easily make that up by your sales. So yeah, I only paid $18 for this, but still, you get 7 sheets, and I've used this a lot, as you can well tell. So that's the veneer. It's very, very thin, very, very brittle. It's you can see that it's almost so thin it's very hard to work with, but it cuts easy, and it sure looks good once the product is done. So today we were talking about doing thin veneers, and this particular box that I'm designing, which is called a small sun box, is a perfect candidate for the veneers. So this box has actually 3 different things that's going on with it. The first part, which is this actual sun here, is a deep inlay, and I'm going to make this out of wenge, which is a black wood. This over here is going to be a yellow heart, so that could be interesting. So that's a very thick inlay here. My source wood is about 1/8 of an inch to 1/16 of an inch for this. Down here, this green area is going to be engraved, and that's all. And I think that's going to look really good inside of the maple that I chose for the bottom. And for today's focus, we're going to deal with this panel over here, which is going to be an inlay. It's going to be the sides of my box, and we're going to use an orange veneer. Now, veneer itself is kind of difficult to work with, and I'll tell you why, because of several different reasons. Number one, the thickness. So the thickness of veneer is going to be very thin, and it can go from 1/32 of an inch all the way to 1/40th of an inch, and that equates out to 0.5 millimeters to 0.6 millimeters thickness. So it's a very, very difficult wood to work with because of its thinness. On the laser itself, when you cut it, if you have too small of a piece, they'll blow away. So you have to have some way to fix them in place so they don't blow away. And that's probably a different topic than what we want to talk about today. All right, so I'm going to get rid of this because we really don't need that here. And delete, okay. Let's concentrate back on here. So this here is going to be the panel that I'm going to inlay. And it's going to be a fill of here because I have to go down either 0.5 millimeters or 0.6 millimeters, depending upon the thickness of the wood that I'm going to use. So I'm going to do a little bit of a preview, and okay, I got a good preview going on here. You may not be able to see that. So let's boost this up a little bit. Okay, so I've chosen on my laser, which is an XM 1060, which is a 100-watt laser. On a 100-watt laser, in order to get the depth that I need over here, I chose a speed of 200 millimeters per second with a percentage of 22. And on my machine, I know that this will cut just enough to get my veneer just slightly below the surface. Now, some people like their veneers slightly above the surface, but since I'm working with such thin veneers, once you start putting things above the surface, and now you do your sanding to get it flush with the surface, you're removing wood. So any mistakes that you make will be amplified, and I really have had bad luck with that. So I try to get my inlays just below the surface of the wood. And a lot of that is trial and error. Maple will cut very nicely at 222 watts, but if I do the same thing to cherry, I'm going to have a big gouge because cherry is a rather soft wood and the laser will chew it very quickly. Okay, so that's how I do the sockets for where I'm going to put my inlays. Now, how do I do the actual inlays? Well, that's pretty simple. In Lightburn or any other software like RDWorks, I'm going to select this and I'm going to do a Control D, which duplicates that layer. I can now move that layer out. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select what the layer is now so that I can cut the outlines. And in my system, I've chosen 5. 5 is going to be over here. It's going to be a line, and I'm going to do it at 100 millimeters per second at 20 watts. And I'm also going to do one pass. Now, the interesting thing about veneers is all veneers aren't equal. Some veneers are made out of Sigmor, some are made out of Kodo, some veneers are made out of other woods, but generally Kodo and Sigmor are the 2 most common ones. And not all woods cut exactly the same, so this again is also another trial and error that I had to go through. This one requires 1 pass. I have some black veneer that requires 2 passes at the same wattage. And I'd rather not increase the wattage because what that does is burns more than I want on these very thin veneers. So I try to keep my wattage low and at the same time keep my speed up so I don't get a good burn. I don't get a bad burn on the system. Now, some people have asked me about kerf settings. Well, if you look at the kerf that I have set up here, oh, look at that. There is none. And the reason for that is pretty simple. I like to see these things fall right into the socket. I don't mind seeing a slight outline if it's there. And if you do it right, there really is not a problem because everything will just fit right in and fit. So I don't use kerf. I do my socket and I do my outline. And like I said before, my black stuff does use 2 passes at this, and I even have some stuff that might require 3, but I generally try not to do that. Okay, so that's how I set this up to do my burns. Okay, I want to show you probably one other thing right here. Let's go down and come up here. Okay, this is not the same topic, but this would be what I would be burning on my wenge. So with my wenge, uh, this is my socket, and you can see that I'm a little bit more aggressive on my burns. I go 80 millimeters per second at 20 watts. And that gets me a pretty deep hole, a little bit more than a 16th of an inch for the entrance here. On the side here, you can see what I did, the same thing, Control D and move it over. And usually you'll see that the line here, I do 40 millimeters per second at 30 watts. And if you look down here, you can see I'm doing 3 passes. That is a lot, but wenge is a dark wood. Wenge is one of the black-woods, and all black-woods have a very, very high difficulty on cutting. So generally, I will go a little bit higher in my wattage, which is the 30. I will go a little bit slower than I normally would, and I'll do 3 passes. That gets me pretty decent. Now, the other problem that you have here is that I generally do in an inverse. I didn't do it here, but what I would do is if you have something like this, let me just show you. I will highlight this, and by using this button over here, I will flip it. Now, what that does is it inverts the image. Now, why is an inversion required? Okay, well, let's talk about this. When you laser, you don't laser straight down. There's really a V channel, and it may be small, you may not even be able to see it, but it's there. There's a V channel. It's wider on the top, narrower on the bottom, okay? Because you're blasting material out from the top, and it just tends to widen a little bit compared to what the bottom is on an 1/8 inch thick wenge piece. So if you do 3 passes, by the time you get down to the bottom, the top is fairly significant. So what I do is I usually invert the top layer, and when I do the cutouts over here, which is for my sun and for my rays, out of this is wenge and this is yellow heart. We'll talk about that in a second. With the wenge, now when I put it back in, I put it in the right way so that the wedge is facing down. So now when I push it in, it will have a nice tight fit on the sides here, and it'll be sticking up proud a little bit above the surface, but you won't see any seam here. Now yellow heart, I usually cut separately, and I still will use 40-30, but I'd probably only do 1 pass. And 40-30 on yellow heart at 1/8, a 16th of an inch cuts right through it. Yellow heart's a really nice wood, and I like it, and it cuts really well. So this here was because I made a mistake when I laid out my piece of wood, and I actually cut off a little bit more than I should have when I did this full thing. Okay, now you might notice these little squares. I do this also when I'm doing my veneers. What I like to do is I always cut a little small square first, just to make sure that it will go through, because you know, from piece to piece, this is basically the right range that will work. But if the wood is a little bit thicker or a little bit wetter, or the moisture is a little bit higher that day, things change. The temperature of the water, I don't know, but it sure seems like sometimes, instead of wasting a lot of wood, I'll do maybe 1/3 of an inch. This is what, 1/2 an inch. I might do 1/4 of an inch over here on a veneer, and that way I can see whether or not it's going to cut with 1 pass, 2 passes, or 3 passes. Okay, so that's it, and that's actually how to cut veneers. I mean, it's pretty simple. Now we'll go through an assembly stage. So after we got everything cut, I cleaned this off with acetone, and that got rid of all of the tar that accumulated from the smoke. So the next thing we've got to do is actually mount it. And I see there's a little piece of something stuck in there. Get rid of that. Okay. So I'm going to be using my standard Titebond 2 glue. And one of the things that you have to do is make sure that we get a good coverage of glue. So I'm going to put just a dab of glue in each one of these little pieces, just like that. Okay, and that's probably good enough. So the next thing I do is I take this tool that I got from Rockler, which is silicone, so the glue doesn't really stick to it. And you got to make sure that the edges and every place gets glue, because we're talking about very, very thin veneers, and you want to make sure that everything sticks correctly. Okay, so I'm going to brush it in to all these little peaks over here. And once I got all of that done, the next thing I'm going to do is take a quick look and verify that, so we've got a problem with a little bit of sticky stuff showing up in there. Okay. You want to make sure you get glue in there everywhere. Okay, now we're ready to mount. So all I do is do a mount, push, do a mount, push, 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 and okay. So now I've put all of my pieces in. I take a slightly moist paper towel and just rub once to get all the glue off. If you don't do this next step, you're going to end up in a little bit of a problem. Okay, and then the final thing is you take a piece of tape and you want to cover and push. And you get that in there really good. Okay, so this looks pretty good to me. I'm pretty happy with it. And what I'll do also is then I'll take a J roller, which is this, and I'll squeeze it so that it goes directly in and make sure that it's as tight as it can possibly be to the glue. And that's it. I'll just let that dry along with its brother, which is right over here. And we'll let that go for maybe 2 hours. Then I can peel the tape off of and do a final sanding. And so it's fairly simple to do these things. The next one we're going to do is a lot more complicated and can go wrong real fast. So we'll hopefully not have too many problems when we do that one. Well, this is the moment of truth over here. And we're going to take this off and hopefully we'll see whether or not this worked. And so far so good. Okay, that looks good. Now I'm going to flip it to the other side and we'll remove that. If I didn't screw up, and I didn't, it looks pretty damn good. Okay, so everything's flat, everything's just slightly recessed a little bit. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go on the sander. I've already, if you notice, I've already assembled the box that I'm working with. So I got this etched design in the front, and then on either side I put the flowers. So hopefully this will be a very pretty box when we're finished, and I will show you the final product. There it is. Okay, so today we're going to be doing a larger inlay, and I've already pre-cut out the inlays that I'm going to do. And since these are large inlays, they have a tendency to absorb the water from the glue, and that causes problems. That's going to ripple. So today I've been using weld bond. So what I've done is I put weld bond in, and then using my good old neoprene, spread it about as evenly as I can and make sure that there's no glops in here. And any glops, I'll just move over to this next segment that I'm going to be doing. Okay, so once everything is in place, I put the inner one in first. Okay, that laid in pretty good. And then I will do the outer one. Now, it's kind of tricky because you got to make sure that it pops in. Okay, and I think I did that. Now I've got a little bit of damp cloth, and I'm going to try to remove as much glue as I can from the top, because I really don't want that glue in there. Okay, because I'm going to have to sand that glue out. Okay, now, like the same thing we did before, we put tape down, and this tape will do two things. It'll, number one, hold everything down, I hope. There you go. Make sure it sits down. And do the next one. Then we'll take my good old J roller. I got it right over here. And again, push it down and make sure that it's below the surface. Okay. That looks pretty good. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and just do all of the others. And see you when I'm all done. So here I've got the complete glue up, and I did rub it down as much as I could with the J roller. So the next thing I want to do is do a little bit of a clamp down if I can. So I take a paper towel, and then I put a piece of wood, and then well, that's not going to work very well, is it? That's got some minor problems. So what we're going to have to do here is probably end up doing a side one like this to try to clamp. So let's see what we can do with that. Yeah, that looks a little bit better. So I'll get a clamp there. And a clamp there. And that should do. Okay. So the two clamps are in, and all we got to do now is wait for it to dry. So a couple of hours, maybe this afternoon, maybe tomorrow morning. Okay, this is what I call the great uncovering. It's either going to work or it's not going to work. So let's see what we got here. Well, so far so good. Yep, so far. Okay. Yep, that looks good. A little sanding and they'll take care of that problem. Take care of that. Let's see what we got here. Yeah. Oh, that's not good. That's not good. Did you see that? It's starting to rip some of the black right there. So that's not good. And I think that's more my fault than anything else. Let's see what we can do with this side here. So I can feel a little ridge here, so I know that didn't work out as well as I wanted it to. This worked out pretty good. Okay. Let's keep moving on. And okay, this is the one that I was having a lot of problems on. Let's see how that's turning out. Okay, good. Not bad, not bad. So, let's see if we can lift this up enough. How's that? So this should do really good. There's a little bit of lift up here, right here. You can see that? I don't know if you can or not. It's very difficult to see. But I think putting a little bit of glue on that and pushing it back down is going to do pretty good. And then once this is sanded, this will look really good. And hopefully I will be able to show you that.